Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I know I did. And, you know, the turkey leftovers are going to be with us for a while, but it's a great time of rest. Now, we're talking about something a little bit different today. We're talking about an Argentine election, which seems kind of far afield, but it really isn't. And it isn't because something's happening and has been happening in Central and South America that's really, really dangerous to our national security. Obviously, Mexico's a little more than a narco state, so it's Mexico's kind of a narco state that's at war with the United States. At least the narcotics cartels are. Guatemala's stable, supportive of the United States. At least, actually, Guatemala might have changed. It's a Honduras had a leftist leader who was voted in at late 2021. Nicaragua, the Sandinistas still run Nicaragua. Costa Rica's okay. Panama's leans towards America. We know about Venezuela, who's had a massive, running a anti-U.S. operation in the throughout South America, but also in Central America. Colombia, which was a stalwart supporter of the United States, has flipped to being allied with Venezuela, notably providing creating a real problem because Panama then you now have people who hate us and control the southern Panama border. Ecuador has gone to being a left-wing government. Peru's become a left-wing government. In the election earlier this year, Bolsonaro lost in circumstances that were reminiscent of the Donald Trump election in 2020. And so Brazil's now run by a communist. Bolivia's been communist for a long time. Bolivia, the place where most people only know about it because it's where Paul Newman and Robert Redford died in their in the movie. Which was where they jumped off the cliff at the end. Paraguay just said they're going to normalize and try to normalize with Brazil in terms of leaning towards China. So Paraguay is now leaning towards China. Leaving Chile and Argentina as the two places in South America where things have actually gone our way. In Argentina, we just had an election 2 weeks before the winner is able to takes office. A guy named Javier Milei, Miliei, I think, takes office. He's a different kind of guy because he's not a traditional center-right candidate, and he's not a left candidate. He's a new breed, libertarian oriented, who wants to get rid of the central bank in Argentina. Understand, Argentina has been suffering this past year had inflation of 135%, 136% as in October, as measured in October. That means that if you see a year ago what you could buy for 1 peso, you now have about 0.4, equivalent of 40 cents on the dollar. That is actually that's deflation. It'd be that same thing would now be $2.40. That's what that's the equivalency for that. So $1 peso a year ago, what the purchasing power of 1 peso is now purchasing power about $2.4 pesos. So it tells you the ravaging inflation. So U.S. we've had inflation. Argentina has been devastated. They've had hyperinflation and they've had hyperinflation a lot in recent history. So this was a rebellion against that, a voter rebellion against that. And the result of that voter rebellion against it is that there is that now Argentina is saying with the new with Milei is saying, hey, let's get rid of the Argentinian central bank and replace it. Just use dollars, U.S. dollars. We'll take the U.S. dollar inflation rate any day over what we've got. Now, the financiers around the world are going nuts over this because essentially what Argentina is saying is, we're going to default on our debt. And that's driving all the people who hold the Argentinian debt nuts. But the fact of the matter is 136% inflation rate is defaulting on the debt, because debt that you accepted a year ago is worth, 1.5 times less. That's effectively a default. The new president wants to start clean, wants to wipe the slate clean, start with the U.S. dollar. And unlike Brazil, which has been part of the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, and China initiative to destroy the U.S. dollar as world reserve currency, Argentina wants to embrace the U.S. dollar, which is a big change, and it's a good thing for America. So the reason Argentina matters is because we actually finally won one in South America. And I don't think most people realize that South America, which we used to look at as being protected through Monroe Doctrine way back when James Monroe was president, back in the early 1800s. The Monroe Doctrine said to Europe, hands off of Mexico, hands off of Central America, hands off of South America, and essentially that was we told Europe that they weren't going to be colonizing anymore in the Americas. So what happens? 200 years later, we now have China effectively colonizing South America. And it's dangerous for us from a geopolitical standpoint. When you just look at Venezuela, that Cuba, I've just got this map here of how the world works here. This is the Caribbean Sea here. Cuba, we know Cuba is 90 miles from Florida. Okay, 90 miles from Florida. So that gives you some perspective. Florida would be in the map because this is Texas here. So Florida would be in the map right about there. But point being, Venezuela is not far from the U.S. The Caribbean Sea is relatively small, and so Venezuela, Colombia, they have the capacity to do great damage to the United States if they become hostile powers that are intent upon housing and staging missiles. And we already know that that their missile technology has been put into Venezuela, and Colombia is one of the ways we were offsetting that and threatening Venezuela through our relationship with Colombia. And now Colombia has thrown out the American supporting government and pushed in a Venezuelan supporting government because that turned out so well. So that's where we are in the world. And so Argentina electing somebody who's pro-American is a big deal. It's a big deal. Here's a little bit about it. Miseries. I pulled this from, this is SETI, who talks about shutting the central bank. I'm going to do this first. Here you have a Breitbart article. Milei, I have to figure out how to pronounce that guy's name. He came to the United States, and before meeting U.S. officials, he went to visited a burial site that's very important to the Jewish community, and at a time where so many of our world leaders and countries around the world are adamantly choosing the Hamas side over Israel. He cried at the site because this is because of the importance of this, and sharing grief with one of the Jewish rabbis who has advised him in the past. So we have a guy who is ardently pro-Israel. He is ardently he's described as being a very spiritual person. He is Catholic, but he studied the Torah. He's been so he studied the roots of the Christian religion by studying Judaism, and is somebody who has a real deep religious sense, and is based on morality rather than on a false empowerment based upon who is the perceived oppressor and who's the perceived oppressed. So this is the kind of person who got elected, and I think it's important to know that when somebody gets elected, sometimes it matters what their what their internal DNA is. And he's not a politician. He's a guy who cares deeply about spiritual things, and in fact, he views his election as being basically by the grace of God, by his own talking. So, that's what we have. So we've got a guy who in Argentina who looks favorably upon the West. He looks favorably upon Israel, and is a real departure from some of the governments that have been elected elsewhere in South America, and quite honestly, really threaten our national security by becoming, because they're all in danger of becoming Chinese satellites. And we know that Venezuela never held a fair election after Maduro got in back in the day. And and so there never was a chance to win again in Venezuela. And we don't know the state of the elections as they go forward in Colombia and elsewhere. Like I say, Ecuador, Peru just flipped within the last 3 years. But now we've got something happening that's different. We have Argentina going to somebody who supports America, into a center right government, more of a Donald Trump government, if you want to know the truth. So what's the history in Argentina? Well, in 2019, Argentina elected the left-wing government. Okay, and Joe Biden won in 2020. In 2015, Argentina elected a center-right government, and America in 2016 elected Donald Trump. In 2011, Argentina elected Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, probably the last Argentinian you've heard about in terms of being the president. She was elected, and it was a leftist. And then in 2012, we reelected Obama. So for the last 4 elections in Argentina, which are all 1 year before ours, the party that won, the right-left side that won in Argentina, was a precursor to what happened in America a year later. Now, just like in investing, you can't take, just because it's happened in the past doesn't mean it's guaranteed to happen in the future. But the last 3 elections have been a pretty consistent timeline of Argentina's election queuing up very nicely with what actually happened in America. And so from a trend standpoint, it certainly can be viewed as a very good trend that Argentina elected a leader who is supportive of the United States. And hopefully what will happen is, as a leader supportive of the United States, inflation he'll be able to tame inflation. His goal, again, get rid of the central bank, which is failing in Argentina, and attempt to tame inflation essentially by, walking away from the debt and saying to the banks, well, tough. We're going to be using dollars here. And what that would mean very clearly, though, is that the government would have to, then they couldn't finance their debt, their deficits with printing money, because they wouldn't have a printing press, because he'd be relegated. He'd be giving the printing, saying, I'm using the United States printing press. And so with that, it creates a whole different capacity to borrow against the future in terms of treasury bills and the like from Argentina. And it would be a bold way to go. But a lot of the world financiers will say you can't do that. If you get rid of your central bank, you're not able to pay for deficit spending and the like. And the fact of the matter is, if you're running 130% inflation rate, something's got to change. And one of the things that can change is we're not going to continue the temptation of just printing more bills. We're going to deal with our expenses, and we're going to cut what we have to cut to get to balance. And unfortunately, what happens when you cut stuff to get to balance, the people who are beneficiaries of that stuff all get mad, and that becomes a bit of a problem when your constituents are all mad. What's more, he doesn't have his party, he kind of came out of nowhere. His party doesn't have a majority in the Argentinian legislature. And so anything he wants to do that's radical, he'll have to get essentially approval of at least one of the other major parties. And in doing so, there'll be a lot of back and forth with the Argentina legislature. So it'll be interesting to watch. Main point here is this matters to America. We have to reverse the trend in South America. We cannot have a communist Chinese-driven South America with China controlling the Panama Canal, because they manage it now for Panama. We can't have Central America being looking to China as opposed to the United States. And truth be told, when these countries end up looking back to America, we need to make sure they succeed. It's in our interest for Argentina to succeed. That's what's in our interest. Argentina is the country in Central and South America, which is most like the United States, at least the northern part of it, which has got plains. They've got the gauchos, the cowboys, and it's got some of the best beef in the world. It's in many respects very much like America from that regard. Of course, you get further south and you're down by the Antarctica and Tierra del Fuego and the like, and it's really cold. But it's a very large state from north to south, and it is and from a climate standpoint, a lot of it's a lot like the United States. So there's a lot of affinity there in terms of topography and the like. And it's our hope, that we have to figure out, as a U.S. government, we have to figure out how to help Argentina succeed. And so other countries say, hey, wait a second, Argentina's succeeding. That's what we need to do. Just like we helped Chile succeed. And Chile is now one of the few truly capitalist countries in South America. And so we have to help capitalism work in these places, because eventually what's going to happen is Honduras will move back into our column, hopefully, and Guatemala will be. And rather than letting those countries hang on the vine and basically have all their people escape and come here, if we can develop trade policies that encourage growth of those economies, so people have jobs there, that solves most of our illegal immigration problem. We want to encourage job growth and actually let a free enterprise economy thrive in some of those countries. In Honduras, for instance, they've got a brand new international airport, which is great. It was great when the Honduran government was on our side. Not so good now, since it's useful for military purposes. Big international airport also can take a lot of planes and things like that that are military planes. So it's not that great from that perspective, but they've got a massive new international airport, state of the art, which is perfect for trade. And it's a perfect opportunity for us if we're going to move our economics. If companies want to move as they should, from China, because they want supply chains, the place to, putting their businesses into Central America, putting their businesses into Argentina even, gives, at the very least, it's a you're shipping, you don't have to go through any canals. You can ship up to the East Coast, and creating a more secure supply chain that doesn't have to go across the Pacific with an ever more aggressive Chinese presence in the Pacific. So there's some advantages to this in terms of securing supply chains. And quite honestly, the whole purpose after World War II of Marshall Plan and the like was to export capitalism. It's why the IMF exists. It's why the World Bank exists, is to export capitalism against communist regimes, offsetting the promises of communist regimes. Those systems have failed. They failed because you just look at the world and you can see that we haven't done a good job. Well, as one of the things we have to be able to do in 2025 is export capitalism to places that want it and make sure they thrive, so other countries throw out the left-wing dictators that they've just elected and throw them out the next election, and we create a block of free market countries where they thrive, where their economies thrive, and we choke the communist move throughout South America. We choke it off based on economic wins for those countries. This is Rick. Let's see what we have here. I'm going to look on this and see if we got any chat. I'm going to just go and say, and just break it off there. It's kind of exciting to be able to talk about something a little bit different. We've got a great article on inflation here in America on dailytorch.com. I would encourage you to check it out. And we will just call it a day. Thank you very much. And let's talk to you tomorrow.